All right, we are starting chapter 9, and chapter 9 is just working backwards from all the stuff that we just did in chapter 8. So in chapter 8, our goal was to take something that had parentheses and distribute or FOIL or somehow combine the terms to get rid of the parentheses and smush it all together. This chapter, you're going to be given it when it's already smushed together, and our plan is to spread it all apart and get parentheses with our final answers, and that's going to be called factoring. Okay, so last chapter we were simplifying and multiplying things together. This is factoring. You're splitting things into their factors. So like the simplest factoring, so like if I have a 6, I can split a 6 into factors of 2 and 3, right? Because 2 times 3 gives me 6, okay? So essentially last chapter you would be multiplying the 2 and 3 to get to the 6. This time you're splitting the 6 into the 2 and the 3. So it's more complicated than that because we're going to have a bunch of parentheses, or we're going to have a bunch of exponents and variables and things in there too. But that's the idea, right? You're taking one thing and you're splitting it into 2 that equal it, but you're just going to split it apart. So prime numbers are numbers whose only factors are 1 in itself. So like 7 is prime. Because 7, the only things that evenly divide 7 are 7 and 1. Okay, so factors, you can think of it as just like what numbers divide this one. Okay, that's a factor, something that goes into it. A composite number is a whole number that has more than 2 factors. So like we just said, 6. Okay, 6 is a composite number because the factors of 6 are 1 and 6. Those are factors, and 2 and 3. Okay, so since it has multiple groups of factors, it's a composite number. Whereas 7 is a prime number because the only factors of 7 are 1 and 7. Okay? All right, greatest common factor is the biggest thing that can divide both numbers. Okay? So if I'm looking at, let's say I'm looking at 6 and 24, okay? They share a lot of factors. They share a factor of 2. They share a factor of 3. But the biggest factor, the greatest common factor that they share is 6. The biggest number that divides both of those is 6, okay? So the greatest common factor is the biggest one that divides both, all 2 or 3 or 4 or however many you're looking at a time. All right, so factoring, we're going to start today. There's lots of different types depending on the type of question that you're given. Today we're going to start with working with reverse distributing, or taking out the greatest common factor, okay? So you're going to want to get in the habit of looking for this no matter what. It's easy to kind of forget about it when we're moving on, but we need to just build a strong foundation and always looking for the greatest common factor. So we look here. There's no equal sign, which we need to start looking for as well. There won't be today, but tomorrow there will be. So just be aware that we will eventually be solving these, but right now we're just trying to factor it. So look at your coefficients first. Look at your normal numbers. So 12 and 16. You have to think about what is the biggest number that divides 12 and 16. Okay? Biggest number that's going to divide both of those is 4. So I write it down. Remember, my coefficients and my exponents never do the same thing. So for my coefficients, I was looking for the biggest number that divides it, and I found it. I wrote it down. Now I'm going to move to my variables. Okay, you have 2 terms here, so you have to look at each term. This term has 2 A's. This term has 1. Okay, we are taking things away from these terms. We're factoring things out. So you have to take out what they have in common, okay? So you can only take out as many A's as the littlest one has to give you. So my first term could give me 2 A's if I wanted them, okay? But my second term only has 1 to give me. I can't take 2 away from there. So I can only take out 1 because together they only share 1, okay? So my greatest common factor is 4A. Once I figure that out, I put a parenthesis and I factor it out. I divide both of my terms by 4A. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. Okay, so you're dividing your normal numbers. Your exponents were reversed, so when we distributed last chapter, we added our exponents. So now we're taking them out, so we're subtracting them. So my A's, I used to have 2. I took one of them out, so I still have 1 A left, because 2 minus 1 is 1. There was an addition sign in between those factors, so I dropped the addition sign down, and I divide my second term. 16 divided by 4 is 4. And subtract your exponents. I used to have a single A, but I took an A out, so now that term doesn't have any more A's. So I close the parentheses, and I'm done. Okay? This is the factored form of that equation. Okay? Just to show you what this means, this last chapter, I would have given that to you as the question, and you would have distributed it. And you would have told me, okay, 4 times 3 is 12. A, 1 plus 1 is 2. And then you go to the next term. Drop your addition. 4 times 4 is 16. And between those terms, you have 1A. Okay? That's what we did last chapter. That was the question. But now we're finding that as our answer. Okay? So you can always check yourself by distributing it through and making sure that what you have makes sense. All right, let's look here. There's no equal sign, so you don't have to worry about that. And there's only 2 terms, so you just look at each term. 9 and 36 are your normal numbers. So you're looking for the biggest number that divides 9 and 36, okay? They are both divisible by 3, but the biggest number that divides them both is 9. So I'm going to write the 9 down. Once you figure out what it is, you write it down. Then you go to your variables, and you can only take out, remember, the one that the smallest one has to give you. So the first one has 2, but the second one only has 1, so I can only take 1 away, okay, because you're just subtracting them from there. So if there's only 1, you can only take 1 out. Okay, then you put your parenthesis and you take it out. So 9 divided by 9 is 1. You used to have 2 x's, you took one of them away, so there's 1 left. Drop your addition sign and divide again. 36 divided by 9 is 4. You used to have a single x, but you took it out, so then there's no more x's there, and you're done. The 1 in front of the x is unnecessary. You can keep it there if you want. It's kind of nice to step-by-step divide things out. So I'm not going to get mad if you have it, but you do not necessarily have to. You could FOIL or distribute that back out to make sure it makes sense, but that's the factored version. Factored versions are always going to have parentheses in them. All right, let's look at number 2. I have a 25 and a 15. I only have 2 terms. The biggest number that divides 25 and 15 is going to be 5, so I write it down. Then I go to my variables. This first term has a single x it could give me, but my second term doesn't have any x's. Okay, that last term doesn't have any variables at all, so I can't take any out. If one of them doesn't have any variables to give me, then I don't take any out. So all I can take out of this is a 5. So I put my parenthesis and then I divide my coefficients by 5. So 25 divided by 5 is 5. I had an x on that term and I wasn't able to take any out, so that x is still sitting in the front with the first term. Have a subtraction sign, I drop it down, and I divide 15 divided by 5 is 3, and there weren't any variables to worry about anyway, so that's it. If I distributed that back through, I'd end up where I started. All right, last one, number 3, 24 and 32. The biggest number that divides 24 and 32 is probably going to be 8. So I write the 8 down. Then I go to my variables. This has 2 terms, or 2 y's. This has 1. So I can take out as many as the smallest one has to give me, which is 1. So I can take out an 8y. Put your parenthesis and divide it out. 24 divided by 8 is 3. I used to have 2 y's. I took one of them away, so I have 1 left. Plus 32 divided by 8 is 4. I used to have a y, but I took it out, so that last term doesn't have any more y's. And we're done. All right, factor by grouping is when you have 4 terms you're going to just do what we did, but you're going to do it separately 2 different times because you're going to put them in groups of 2 and then factor out the greatest common factor. Okay? So let's look here. Group them together, ignore the last 2 completely, and just do what we did here. So 4 and 8, their greatest common factor is 4. Now let's look at our variables. This first term has an A and a B, so it could give me a single A and it could give me a single B. My second term only has a B, so they both have B's, they both have 1, so I can take out a single B because that's what they both share. I cannot take out any A's because my second term doesn't have any A's. Okay? So greatest common factor between those 2 pieces is 4B. I put a parenthesis and I factor it out. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. I had an A, but I wasn't able to take any out, so there's still an A in here. I had a B, and I took a B out, so there are no more B's with that first term. Drop the addition sign down, and then go ahead and do the next one. 8 divided by 4 is 2. I had a B, but I took it out, so I'm done, and then that's that grouping. Now, since we're factoring by grouping, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the same thing with these 2 terms. So 3 and 6. The biggest number that divides 3 and 6 is 3. This term has an A, but this term doesn't have any. So I'm not able to take out any variables. So all I'm going to be able to take out is the 3. So I put my parenthesis and I factor out the 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. I had an A. I couldn't take any out, so I still have an A. Plus 6 divided by 3 is 2. I didn't have any variables, and so that's just it. Okay? Now, here's the whole point of factoring by grouping. We did them all each separately, like they were their own problems. Now we kind of have to take a step back and look what we have. For one, this was a positive in between these terms, so I took out a positive 3 here. Okay? So I'm looking at this as a whole. When you are factoring by grouping, this should happen every time. The numbers or the parentheses should match exactly. Okay? So our parentheses match exactly, so our final answer is going to look like this. We're kind of factoring that back out. You write what matched in the parentheses once, 1A plus 2. You write it one time. You need another set of parentheses from your leftovers. So my leftovers are what I took out. I took out a 4B and a plus 3. And then that's my actual answer. Okay? Now, just to kind of show you, you don't have to do this every time, but just to think it through a little bit. If this would have been given to us last chapter, you would have FOILed it. Okay, so 1A times 4B is 4AB. 1A times 3 is 3A. 2 times 4B is 8B, and 2 times 3 is 6. This is a goofy one because your middle terms don't match, but that's exactly what we were given to begin with. My middle terms got flip-flopped around, but that's okay because they're commutative. So you get the same thing when you FOIL it out as you had when you started. All right, let's do this one. So you see 4 terms, so we're going to factor by grouping. So we start with the first 2. Look at your coefficients first, 35 and 5. The biggest number you can take out of 35 and 5 is 5. They both have an x, so you can take out an x. Put a parenthesis and then take them out. 35 divided by 5 is 7. You had an x, but you took it out. Minus 5 divided by 5 is 1. You had an x, but you took it out. I have a y that I wasn't able to take out, so that's still there. Okay? Then we scooch on over here. And then we do these. 3 and 21, I can take out a 3. They do not share any variables, so all I can take out is a 3. And I get a y and a minus 7. I took out a positive 3. Now I look here, I want my my parentheses to match. Right now they don't match, and they actually aren't the same at all, because even if I put this one in the proper order, I would have a negative 1y and a positive 7, okay? Which is okay, but that's not what I have here. I have a positive 1y and a negative 7, okay? So my numbers are the same, but my signs don't match. My signs are flip-flopped. So what we have to do to fix that is that if your signs aren't matching up, then instead of taking out a positive 3, I'm going to change this and take out a negative 3. When I do that, a positive 3 divided by a negative 3 is a negative 1y. And a negative 21 divided by a negative 3 is a positive 7. Now my parentheses match, even though they were in different orders. So my final answer, what matched in the parentheses, was a negative 1y plus 7. And my leftovers were 5x and a minus 3. My leftovers was a 5x and a minus 3. And then I'm done. Okay, that's tricky. We gotta watch your signs a little bit. All right, let's look at the next one. 5 and 15. Biggest thing that divides 5 and 15 is 5. My first term has 2 y's, but my second term only has 1, so I'm able to take a single y out. 5 divided by 5 is 1. I used to have 2 y's, but I took one of them out, so now I have 1 left. Minus 15 divided by 5 is 3. I used to have a y, but I took it out, so no more y's. Scoot on over here and do these two. 4 and 12 are both divisible by 4. They do not share any variables because the 12 doesn't have any at all, so all I'm going to factor out here is a 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. I have a y and I wasn't able to take it out, so it's still there. So drop your subtraction sign. 12 divided by 4 is 3. Before I am married to this answer, make sure it works. So I took out a positive 4, and my parentheses do match this time, so I'm good. So my final answer is what was in the parentheses, which is the 1y minus 3, and then the leftovers that I took out, which was a 5y and a plus 4. So 5y plus 4. You can always check it by foiling it out and making sure you have all the same terms as before. Okay, last one. 5 and 10 are both divisible by 5. They both have c's, but my first term only has 1, so I can only take 1 out. 5 divided by 5 is 1. I had a c, but I took it out, so I don't have any more c's, so that's just a 1, and you do need a 1 there to hold the place. Then a subtraction sign. 10 divided by 5 is 2. I used to have 2 c's, but I took 1 out, so I have 1 left. Scoot on over here, and look at these. 2 and 4, I can take out a 2. They both have d's, so I can take out a single d, put a parenthesis. 2 divided by 2 is 1. I had a d, but I took it out. Drop your subtraction sign. 4 divided by 2 is 2. I had a c, and I couldn't take any c's out, so there's still a c in there. And I had a d, but I took it out, so that was it. I took out a positive 2, and let's make sure we're good with that. Our parentheses do match, so I'm good. So the first part of my answer is 1 minus 2c, that's what matched. And then the leftovers go in the second set of parentheses, which is a 5c and a plus 2d. Okay? So if there's just 2 or 3 terms right now, you're just taking out a common factor, but if there are 4, you're going to factor by grouping. Okay? 9-1.